Welcome to another episode of the Impossible Life Podcast. I'm your co-host, Nick Surface, and I'm looking across at a man so hungry for truth, he once survived 17 days on a deserted island, eating only a dictionary for sustenance. That's right, friends, the former Navy SEAL, Garrett Unkelbach, a man who knows the sustaining power of truth. That was a quickly whipped together because today we're talking about what's keeping you from the truth, G. And I feel like I say this every week. I'm excited about this.
This is going to be a good one.
It's powerful. It's a huge blind spot revealer. And this is something we've been talking about. We have discussions all the time on the side. And a few weeks ago, we did a podcast where we just had one of our discussions that we have on the side on air, which I enjoyed, asking each other questions.
Somebody commented the other day in Mindset Mastery. My friend Andy, he commented when you and I started getting into it. He's like, "This is what we're all really here for."
Yeah, exactly. Which I want to discourage that thought process because it's not what I'm here for. But whatever. Anyways, so
keeps the people going.
Exactly. No, it doesn't. But yeah, so we've had these conversations about the medical field, and you're kind of like, wait, the medical field, and it highlights truth. So let me tell you where this conversation originated from. Garrett often talks about, he said something on a podcast, actually you said it on air like weeks ago. You said doctors give people pills because they know that if they actually told them, hey, here's what you need to get better, most people wouldn't do it.
Yeah, they're prescribing something to you because they can't prescribe you the real medicine.
Right.
Which according to science, for the majority of diseases in this country, the actual prescription is work out and eat better.
Yeah, which is... it's so basic, man. That's actually really that hurts me that it is that simple. Well,
but they can't prescribe that to people,
right? So little insight into my health regime. Like I have a picture, and you helped me form this. I have to give you credit of what I want to look like and what I want my health to be when I'm like 80 years old. I think down the line, and I go, you know what am I going to like? What's my health going to look like? What's my quality of life going to be like? And so I'm taking actions now as far as what I eat, the things I do in my regimen, like how I lift weights, how I build muscle, so I have skeletal health. Like I'm thinking about all these things. So part of that is I go to the doctor. I have obviously my medical insurance, but then I pay a doctor separately that I go to, and I run blood tests twice a year. And I sit down with her, and she's awesome.
You got to invest in your health.
That's exactly right. And that's truly how I see it. I think in that respect, they could say almost anything to me, and I'd be like, well, we're going to do it. Because if you don't have your health, Ralph Waldo Emerson,
it's a totally different situation to be going to your doctor, like with the mindset of looking for feedback to grow. Versus, a lot of people, they avoid the doctor because they don't want to hear it.
Exactly. Well, this is exactly what I said to her. I went in there, and she was like, we were going through numbers. There's all the different numbers. You look at your cholesterol number, your red blood cell count, like all your hormone levels. Like she looks, there's stuff in there that I don't even know how to interpret.
Looking at your liver numbers,
right?
Looking at all kinds of different.
All the numbers. So she's walking me through these things, and I'm like in there, I'm like, okay. And I'm like, check. Okay, what do I need to do here? And she's like, well, I'm not really that worried. I'm like, look. And I said to her, I was like, hey, Dr. Smith, I was like, I'm not here to defend what I do. I was like, I just want to, and I had to say it to her twice. I was like, I'm not here to defend what I do. I'm here because I trust you and I need feedback to help me get better, because it doesn't matter how I feel about this. If I die, like I've kind of failed on why I'm here in the first place.
There's a lot of people who have died justified in their beliefs.
Yeah,
and
100%.
Died wrongly.
Yeah. Oh man, you know what? Yeah, we could go down a whole rabbit hole, which I'm not going to. And so she said to me, like, I had to say it to her twice, and finally she stopped. She's like, she's like, I really appreciate that. She's like, because that's not what I deal with on a day-to-day basis. She's like, and I'm not used to it, so she had to kind of shift her thinking to realize that I was just there to be told, look, here's the things that I'm seeing. Here's what you should do about it. So I was like, great. And so you and I have talked about this before, but what sparked this episode of what's keeping you from the truth, isn't it so weird? Like, think about this. You can go into your doctor 40 pounds overweight, 50 pounds overweight, whatever. Insert the number that you think is enough that your doctor would be like, hey. And they might say like, oh, you could really do with losing some weight. And they'll say that to you, but then they'll start giving you options.
And while at the same time that doctor knows your dramatic increased risk for heart disease.
Right.
Being 40 pounds overweight.
But rather than just saying like, look, you are killing yourself. Like you're shortening your life. And actually, this is your fault. Like you're experiencing pain in your joints, and you have this happening in various organs. This is your fault. They don't say that. They kind of gently ease you into it, or they offer you some options like, hey, we could get you on this prescription or that. Whereas contrast that with if you have a life-threatening disease, they're just like, hey, you have 6 months to live. Like, which one is harder to accept?
Yeah.
But yet this is a normal, like when we were talking about this and I just think this is such a crazy phenomenon that they'll tell you the really, really hard part straight out. But the part that you have all the power to change, they have to kind of ease you into it. And this is not just in the medical field. This is our lives. All the time, we are avoiding hard truths, or we're avoiding things that can actually help us.
There's an underlying thread here in the fact that money influences the situation dramatically.
Yeah, very true.
Being that there's the psychological, which we'll come back to, of why a doctor has trouble saying those things. But it's easier for a doctor to say, hey, you're dying of cancer. You have 6 months to live, because right after that, there's cancer treatment that's financially beneficial to the hospital. And why a doctor won't tell you to exercise and eat better, because there's no money to be made there. They can get you on a prescription. But it's also people are, so that's like some of the truth that's out there about the health situation in this world. But from a psychological perspective, that doctor knows if he tries, like with cancer, people are like, oh, cancer is just a thing. And, some people get it. And the truth is, like life, cancer is not fair. Some people do all the right things and still get cancer.
Yeah.
Some people make all the worst decisions and never get cancer. So it's not like cancer is behaviorally influenced. And I'm not a huge researcher on cancer, but I know it's behaviorally influenced, but that's not like the whole truth of the situation. Versus being overweight, it's not fair either. Life isn't fair. But you have a lot more influence on your body than you do on whether or not you get cancer.
Yeah.
Right? And there's a lot of things you can do to try to prevent it, but some people just still get it anyways. Say that to say people have a hard time with just this simple truth of, hey, you need to change.
Yeah.
That's the cut and dry part. And there's a reason that people struggle with that.
Yeah. And that's exactly what we're going to get into, because if I could have one thing that I would wish for every single person that hears this, is that they come out with a hunger to know the truth that makes them want to take action. And we're going to get into exactly the things that keep you back and the solution and remedy to it. So I remember whenever I first had like the real truth introduced to me, G. And of course, dude, I mean, it was a transformative moment in my life. And of course, it was 1992, A Few Good Men. It was Jack Nicholson sat on trial being grilled by Tom Cruise. What do you want from me? I want the truth. And of course, the famous line, you can't handle the truth. Like, just, so good. I did not see that movie whenever I was a little kid. I saw that much later, so I did not see it in 92. But
such a great scene.
It's like one of those iconic lines. You can't handle the truth. And people, it's been joked about. It's been thrown around in pop culture. By this point, it may be faded completely. But for those of you who are around our age, you'll remember that movie.
Yeah.
And that's most of the people listening. And I love that. But that is like, it's a joke now. But really, that is it. Like, you can't handle the truth. I often think about this. People like to criticize the president and anyone in leadership. And I always hear these people like, oh, the president's an idiot. Like, just, these armchair politicians.
Sure.
And I always go like, hey, do you think there's maybe something that he's getting in his briefing that he's aware of that maybe you're not? I mean, crazy thought. But when you're leveling all your accusations and complaining about a leader next time, just ask yourself the question, do you have the full picture that they do? I'm going to tell you a little hint from my own experience. You don't. So
people love to, when it's okay to be critical, but when you're critical, understand where you're criticizing from.
Yes.
And it's from the sidelines. You're not criticizing from a level of superior intelligence and superior moral authority.
Right. Yeah. Very good. Okay. So G, first thing we've got to define, of course, and like we always go through terms because we can be talking about very different things if we don't get agreed upon terms. And that's why in contracts, the first thing you do is agreed terms. So G, what is truth?
Truth, according to where we like to look, Webster's 1828, a summarized definition from what it says in Webster's 1828 is conformity to reality. And people have a lot of different definitions for truth. When you look at truth in the Bible, the word truth, the Greek word truth, is aletheia, which is essentially the opposite of illusion.
That's good. Yeah.
Right. And that's where I think a lot of people get away from the truth and they're in some form of illusion. And illusions can be strong.
Yeah.
They can have a great hold on you and they really feel like the truth. But you should want to know the truth. You should want to be in reality. Just like, but the truth is not everyone does.
Right.
Just like Cyrus in the Matrix. He wanted to go back into the illusion because the illusion felt better than the truth. Which is in itself a form of an illusion. He'd been deceived by the agents outside of the Matrix. But anyways, I say that to say we've all got to have this desire to get to the truth, because this is what Scripture says, is that the truth will set you free.
Yeah.
Right? They will know that this is Jesus. They will know the truth, and the truth will set them free. And that's what we should all want, is to know what the truth really is.
Yeah. There was a saying that I used to hear when I was growing up that really bothered me, because I just logically, I worked out the implications of it, and I was like, that doesn't work. And it was somebody that I respected, that was a mentor in my life, would say perception is reality. Have you heard that, Fergie?
Of course.
Yeah, people say that, and it's like, no. Because if perception is reality, then that means that we're all walking around in different realities, and that doesn't work. Because at what point, whose reality is right? So, like, what is actual reality? And this is why a lot of people will miss out on reality. Spirit is real.
The truth is that there is a reality that we're all in. What you're experiencing is your perception of reality.
Right.
But to say perception is reality is a misnomer.
Yeah.
It's just like when you start to change some of these little words.
Yeah.
Just for example, we won't hang out here, but just for example, right? Like what gets quoted all the time is money is the root of all evil.
Right.
Right. And there's a few things taken out of that scripture. It doesn't say money is the root of all evil. It says the love of money is the root of all evil, but it doesn't actually say of all evil. It says of all kinds of evil.
Right.
Because if you could, well, yeah, it says the love of money, but then to say that the love of money is the root of all evil, it would be like it's the inception point by which all evil comes from, which is also not true.
Right.
So you start to change the words in the statement just a little bit, and you really get away from what the truth is.
Yeah, because the implications of those statements are very, very different. So, let's give people, so like we said, it's conformity to reality, and that it's very, I think a lot of people, like you gave the example of Cyrus, the illusion, when your illusion becomes truth, like what? It's Mark Twain's quote, right? It says, it's not what you don't know that will kill you. It's what you know that just ain't so.
Yeah.
And it's like, or what you think you know that just ain't so.
Right, what you think you know.
And that's so good. So like where reality comes from, I said it real quick, like if you will miss out on a lot if you completely ignore the spirit realm, because if God created us, God is spirit, right? Spirit spoke reality into existence. So like we have 5 senses to take in all our reality. And if that's making up everything you know, I mean, you know this from some of the high pressure situations you've been in, your senses will lie to you. You like to talk about pilots all the time.
Oh yeah.
Like,
one of the, there's a lot of, I won't get into like the psychology and the biology of where it comes from, but one of the strongest abilities that humans have is illusion detection, right? Because it's one of those things that you can't really, and I could go like into sci-fi and technology and all these different approaches to like illusion detection, but we're all trying to have this ability to detect illusions, because it's like we know like to be deceived is to lead us to our end. Right. It's scripture says it the same way, like it will lead you to death. And so we also know that inherently, whether you believe in the Bible or not, that if you follow an illusion, it will get you killed. Yeah. And so that's one of like at a core reason why we should want to know the truth.
Yeah. No, very good. Well, let's zoom everybody out. So like just for a second, because if you don't understand where truth comes from, you're not going to know where to go to find it, and you're going to miss out. Like we said, the whole point of this is that we would have people want to deeply pursue the truth. So like zoom out from the beginning of creation, right? And if you look at like the timeline of God interacting with humanity over the thousands of years, we don't know exactly how long the world's been around, but it started off with God in person with people, and he gradually started shifting.
It was in the beginning, it was God and a man.
Right, exactly. And he walked with them in the garden. It was, hey, because I mean, you think about if you're God and you've created this creation that's got this body that you don't have, how are you going to start to interact with them? Well, it was personal. It was one-on-one. And then over time, he starts giving the responsibility to do his work and to be his people over to human beings, so you then get prophets, right? And then Jesus comes in the New Testament, and it's his spirit. In the last days, he will pour out his spirit. So the biggest thing was that Jesus brought the Holy Spirit, and then we got like the written word, the complete written word of the Old Testament, New Testament that we have that's completely unchanging. And so when you look at how God did this, it went from being like, hey, and
I'll just plug as a reminder, because we've quoted it many times, but from a conversation I had with Dan Crenshaw.
Right.
Yes. And I this is many years ago, when Dan Crenshaw was running for re-election, and I got the chance to interview him in front of a panel of very wealthy people. He was raising money, and I said, Dan, what role does religion play? And I got to ask him whatever I wanted, and I asked him a lot of the questions that he wanted to get asked, but I wanted to ask this question.
Yeah.
And I said, Dan, what role does religion play in the life of a political leader? And he talked about some of his opponents, and then he said, what you can know about me is that the Bible is a source of truth for my life. And what's great about the Bible is that it's unchanging, right? So
Yeah.
all of the decisions I make tomorrow, the decisions I make 4 years from now, my opinion's not going to change on what I think is right or wrong,
Right.
because it comes from the Bible, and the Bible is unchanging.
Yeah, that's so good. And there's people will say, well, there's lots of people, there's lots of different denominations, and there's people that interpret things differently. We're going to get into that because that's a fair point, and so we are going to get into that. But like I was saying, so when you look at how God works, he went from, hey, it's all me, to I'm having people then speak on my behalf that are divinely inspired, to now my spirit is in you, that if you sow to it, you can reap from it. So it's there for you, for me to interact, speak through you, reveal to you. And you now have the written word. So he's giving us tools. And it's just, I just think it's interesting to see how God is moving from like a 50,000 foot view. But then also understand this. It starts with the son, right? It's a father and son. And if you look at Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, it starts with the family, like a father-son, then moves to a family that become a people over time. And then Christ came to do what? He built his church. That's the one thing that he established on earth, was the church. And so when you think about how God's moving in people from that view, like how are you going to get into the source of truth and to understand the nature of reality, which is spirit? God's been giving you these tools. Like you look at how he's done it over time. Wouldn't it be great? Like my daughter said, she's like, man, why doesn't God just show up in people's houses and talk to them, or like have a YouTube channel? And I thought, you know what? That's a really sweet. She's 11. But that's a good thought process. And honestly, the reason Jesus showed up in person, and what did they say? Hey, give us a sign. Dude, he's healed and raised people from the dead for like 3 years.
Yeah.
And he says only a wicked and perverse generation asks for a sign. And so, unfortunately, I think even if God did appear in the flesh to everybody like that, you would still have plenty of people being like, nah.
They'd miss it.
Yeah, they'd miss it, which is kind of mind-blowing. So what does that tell you? It's not about the means. It's about the interpretation in you as a person of how you receive it. So, we talked about, like, we're basically saying that the Word of God, God's Spirit, these are the tools, the church, these are the things that God has given us now in modern times for us to be able to dive into and to know truth. But like, I can interpret this. There's 50 different denominations. Like, what really matters there?
Objectively, people want to know, like, let's not just talk, we'll talk outside the Bible for a second before we come back to it. Objectively, people want to know the truth.
Right.
For thousands of years, people have been studying science.
Yeah, very
How
good.
does the world work? How does the universe work? And eventually they come to the truth, and they're able to see it over and over and over again. And okay, this is what works, right? For a long time, that they thought the universe revolved around the earth.
Yeah.
And they found out that wasn't true.
Yeah.
And
Galileo.
Yep. And then they came to realize the truth, and that's the truth is that the universe, or our galaxy, rotates around the sun. The earth is rotating around the sun, not the other way around. And so objectively, we're coming to find truth that we can live by it, that we can prove it, we can see it, right? It adds fruit to our life. And Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. He's saying, like, look, I am the opportunity that you have to know truth, and you need to come to know me. But people need, like, we all need truth in our life. And I would tell you that people seek truth for different reasons, and this is what's dangerous, right? And we're going to get into a little bit later. We're going to get into a little bit later some of the things that keep you from the truth, because that's really what this podcast is about. But people seek truth for different reasons. And when sometimes people seek truth, we've done this. I've done this. You seek truth to confirm what you want, right? You seek truth to get what you want out of a situation, right? It's called bias, right? Instead of seeking the truth, you're seeking what you've already decided that you want, and you're trying to get the truth to confirm what you want, confirm what you believe. Unfortunately, we can do this in a way even with the Bible. People bend the Bible to say things that it does not actually say.
Yeah.
But I say that to say the reason you're seeking truth is what matters. We've talked about this so often on the podcast. I think it's one of the most interesting things in Scripture, just like the way that the Bible talks about David, that he was a man after God's own heart. God cares deeply about what's in your heart, because your heart is the desire center. It's a reflection of what you want. And so what you've got to decide is, hey, I want to know the truth.
Yeah.
Not I want what I've already decided I want. And inherently, to be able to do that, this is the same way that we've talked about dreams. To be able to truly say, I just want the truth, you have to be willing to let go of anything else. And most people don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I want to be a Christian, but I don't want to let go of this.
Yeah.
I want to know God, but I'm not willing to change that part of my relationship. I'm not willing to give up this thing. right? God will test you in that. And
Yeah.
if you really want to know the truth, you have to decide, I want it more than anything. And that's how you'll know the truth. Most people only want the truth to confirm what they've already decided that they want. And we hear this over and over and over again in Scripture. Jeremiah 23, you will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart. Hebrews 11:6, without faith it is impossible to please him. For whoever would draw near to God must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who seek him. And Deuteronomy 4:29. But from there you will seek the Lord your God, and you will find him, if you search after him with all your heart and with all your soul. When with all of it means I would lay down anything. I would give up anything to know God. I would give up anything to know the truth. And when that's really what you seek, that's when you'll come to find the truth.
Yeah. So it really boils down to just to being a heart issue, which is, man, which is sounds simple. I hope that's encouraging, because if your heart is truly set on God, it doesn't have to be all
heart.
right.
Proverbs says, out of the heart flow the issues of life.
Yeah.
What's really in your heart is what's going to come out.
And it's such an interesting thing, because while you were talking about like people not really wanting to know the truth, one of the things where you hear people a lot of times argue in church, if you're in church culture, is around tithing. What I've never heard anybody say is, I've never heard someone say like, I just don't want to, or I don't believe the Bible. What you'll hear is like, that's Old Testament, or they still appeal to the same source of truth, and what they're actually saying is like, that's not how I interpret it, which is still setting yourself up. But like the importance of this with Jesus, and where I find that
I've never met someone who's just like a super generous person say they think tithing is stupid.
Well, that's an interesting point, G.
But why? Because if you already believe in like giving, you're going to want to participate in tithing,
right?
But it's what I'm setting up as an example as people confirm the truth that they want to believe.
Yeah, 100%. But I just think it's so fascinating, the nature of people's appeals and our logic, and when you actually like start to think about the implications of things that we say and don't question all the time. I mean, like you said, so if you want to know the truth, that's where questions can be very good. If you want to get something you want, that's where questions can be very, very bad. And the very first sin with Eve, right? Did God really say? How did the devil work? It was like, it's not, he twisted the meaning behind why. Yeah, he twisted the meaning behind why God said something. And that was all he had to do, was insert a little bit of doubt. And then once the doubt became about, this is something you can get, the whole thing fell apart. And that's over and over and over again. We see that in ourselves.
And it's not that. What's interesting, and we won't dive deep into it, but one of the things that's interesting about the tree of knowledge of good and evil is that Adam and Eve already knew what was right and wrong.
Right.
And they knew it was wrong to eat of the tree.
Yes.
It's not that they didn't have a knowledge of good and evil.
Yeah.
Right. It's more like I think what that fruit was, literally, it's the fruit of evil.
Right.
Right. That to taste it and to experience. They already knew what was wrong. It wasn't about knowing right from wrong.
Right.
But it was about to experience those things.
Yeah, I have a whole bunch of other thoughts that would not be a good use of time, but there's so many interesting things, like why was the tree there in the first place? And then he,
the modern day example of the knowledge of good and evil, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, is when people say, "Well, I just got to see for myself."
Right. Really catch that.
Yeah.
I just got to see for myself. That's what you've said this before, that it's the fool that says that he's only going to learn the lessons that he learns personally and doesn't learn from other people. So we're going to get into now like some of the different reasons specifically, but I am just so fascinated. I was thinking like this episode kind of made me get nostalgic in a lot of ways and think about some of the different areas that were like important truths for me as a kid growing up. And like that nature of questioning reality and questioning different things. I mean, what you talked about, what Westworld is a show that you love where they talk about that.
Yeah, I should have brought that up when we were talking about the heart, but in Westworld, if you've never seen the show, it's okay, but it's this really, I really like sci-fi and futuristic things. It's always been fascinating to me. And in this show, there's these robots that are becoming human, they're becoming self-aware.
Right.
And one of the things they continually ask the robots throughout the show, or at least in the beginning of the show, as robots are becoming self-aware, one of the things they ask them is they say to the robot, "Have you ever questioned the nature of your reality?" And they know if I won't go deep into the show, but they realize if the robot's is starting to question the nature of their reality, that's how they realize this robot is starting to become human. And so I say that to say, to question the nature of your reality, this comes back to our detection detection ability, right? That we're looking for illusions.
Yeah.
And it's okay. It's good that you would question your reality. It's not, I'm not saying it's wrong that
Right.
you question your reality, but coming back to the hard issue, it's about the nature by which you would question.
Yeah.
Are you questioning saying, and this is really the way that we should question, you should question from a Socratic mindset of,
Right.
I want to know the truth. Are there things that I don't know? Are there things that I'm not seeing? If you will just have that, like I don't need to sell anybody to God, right? I don't need, like, I will try, but I don't have to. If you would just have an open mind, I know that you will find God.
Right.
Right. But people miss God through a closed heart. And so I've just brought up that I think that point is interesting. Like, that show centers around this question.
Yeah.
Have you ever questioned the nature of your reality? We should question the nature of our reality, but you've got to have a heart of, hey, I want to find the truth, not I want to confirm what I want.
Right.
I want to build the world around me. That is a galaxy where you think everything rotates around the earth, and it's false.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And yeah, good luck with that. I mean, I was thinking about, Garrett went super deep there. I was just thinking about when I was a kid, we would argue over whether wrestling was real or not. So a little bit different. Now,
Dude, that was such the argument. No, dude, it's real.
I'm telling you, man, he threw him through a table, bro. There's no way.
He hit him in the head with that chair. The chair was dented.
Yeah, and you talk about illusions, and of course, our society is like fascinated with like magic and like I find that so interesting that we know these guys are like, we can watch David Copperfield or whoever make like a jet disappear, and
That's what you say.
That's what you say, and it's like nobody goes like, well, that's fake. Who cares? Everyone wants to try and figure it out. And why is that? It, like you said, we have this illusion detection in us that's like, if you could figure it out, or like I remember there was this show back in the day called Secrets of Magic Revealed, and they showed you all these things. I remember I was so disappointed because I realized how simple it was. That like
it makes you feel smart if you can figure out a magic trick.
Right.
And that's why people are so obsessed with controversy today.
Huh.
It's
Yeah.
like it's sitting in the audience at a magic show and see, look, I knew.
That's a very good point, G.
But people are trying to turn things into, a magic show that aren't a magic show.
Right. They see magic everywhere, and it's like, no, that actually happened. Yes. All right. So what's keeping you from the truth, Garrett? And we went into a lot of different things and looked at this. So we're going to give you some scenarios and some different categories. But the first thing is personal responsibility.
I want to come back to like really the prompt of
Yeah.
this. Like, what got us onto this episode was what Nick brought up in the beginning, the thought process of like, why is it that you would go to your doctor? And, Nick has a relationship with his doctor, like, hey, you should, if you want to get healthier, you should do this. If you want to improve this, you should do this. Why is it, both as a patient and in a medical society, why is it that you could go to your doctor and your doctor would not tell you the truth?
Yeah.
What's the reason for that? And more importantly, if you just take it, if we, forget about what's happening in the medical society, let's just take it upon ourselves. What kind of person am I that my doctor, because Nick had to tell his doctor, hey, look, no, tell me, please tell me the truth, right? I want to get better. What type of person am I that people couldn't tell me the truth? And that's a scary thought process, right? What have you become that your doctor can't tell you the truth? What if your friends couldn't tell you the truth?
Yeah.
Man, I wish I could tell my friend this, but they would just be too offended and cry.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I can't tell my patient that they really just need to exercise and lose weight because they're not capable of doing it. They're not strong enough to do it. It should be scary to you that you couldn't hear or see the truth. And so what we're going to break down here at the end of this episode is these are the things that keep us from the truth.
Well, you kind of alluded to it, G. And I mean, the first thing we touched on was personal responsibility, right? Like you hear something, somebody would say something to you, and because it would require personal responsibility, you wouldn't be willing to accept it, right? I mean, one of the things that, I think if you could sum up the whole of our relationship, I think the big highlight that you and particularly your dad also highlighted for me was my own weakness. And like the hallmark of weakness, and this became reality, or it highlighted the reality of so much of my thinking, was that when something happens, instead of going like, hey, that's on me, I would immediately think of the reasons why it wasn't my fault. And so the hallmark of weakness is blame. It's putting it off of yourself.
Let me break down we'll just stay here for a second. Let me break down like the failure of personal responsibility in the world that we live in. We live in a legal society, rightfully so, that you have to be, convicted by a group of your peers that the entire group of 12 is convinced that you have done it, right? You have to prove that I'm guilty. And so, and that's great for law, right? Like someone should not be. And the truth is, there's sometimes people who are guilty don't get convicted guilty, but we care more about innocent people being wrongly convicted. So we've created a legal society that protects people, right? The innocent should be protected. God will deal with those who get away with crime, but we should not be wrongly convicting innocent people. That's what is that our entire legal system is rightfully centered around that. But what that creates in a personal responsibility standpoint, this is where a lot of entitlement comes from, is people say, well, I'm not responsible until you could convict me of it.
Right.
Right.
Yeah,
until everyone can, like, really what you're saying is I'm not responsible until anything else, because this is what they will do in court, right? They'll look at every potential. Was it this scenario? Was it this scenario? Was it this scenario? And they'll disprove all these other scenarios as much as they can, and to try and prove a guilty verdict, right? Any of these other things are far less likely than this guilty verdict, right? And so people have to prove that it was you. That's not how you should look at personal responsibility in your life.
Right.
The way that I look at responsibility is, well, I could have done something, right? What's the difference between fully responsible and partially responsible? To me, if I'm partially responsible, I'm going to feel fully responsible. If I could have done something, then I'm guilty if I didn't do something.
Right.
Versus most people's level of responsibility is like, well, I'm not really responsible until anyone else that had any part to play in it, and including environment and externals, until it was none of that stuff and it was wholly and solely upon me to be responsible, then I'll address it. And if that's your level of responsibility in life, you can be trusted with very little. You're not even a good steward of what you do have.
Yeah. Now, the hard implication of what you just said is that you have to look at your marriage, your finances.
If you can do something about it. Not if you're wholly and solely responsible, because you're wholly and solely responsible for basically nothing.
Right.
Right? Other than your own attitude and response to life.
Right.
You're wholly and solely responsible for very little things. So you have to say, if I'm partially responsible, if I can do anything about it, I'm going to make it different.
Right. Now, the empowering, freeing part is, guess what? That means you actually can make an impact on things. Because to me, what sounds like the worst thing in the world is if I was completely enslaved and I literally was powerless. And the reason I say that is because whenever I was battling depression, that was really what it all boiled down to. Is I felt like all these outside forces were just pushing me around, and there was nothing. I became more and more powerless.
It's so funny to me that we can have this mentality of being afraid of responsibility. As if I could, like, people look at things in their life, are like, well, I can't do anything about that, so I'll just give up.
Yeah.
But you know what? And girls play video games too, but a lot of men play video games, and you play these role-playing games where, like, when you start the character, 95% of the game is impossible for you.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
There's only, like, part of it. It's like, well, I'll just go play this one part of the game. And then you level up and you're like, oh, well, I can go to the next area.
Yeah.
And you eventually beat the entire game, where when you started the game, 95% of the game, there's no way I could beat it.
Yeah.
Right? But you level up and you grow and you take it on one piece at a time. And you've got to have this mentality with responsibility in your life that, you know what? I'm going to do what I can do today.
Yes.
I'm going to fix what I can fix now. And maybe I'll get stronger and better, and then I'll be able to take on the next piece.
Yeah, I love that. And that actually leads to number two, one of the number two reasons of what's keeping me from truth, which is fear. Because what you talked about in the video game, and the reason why men will play a video game that they know that they can't beat the boss at the beginning, but they know they're going to level up, is because they have certainty. And one of the greatest fears for people is uncertainty. It's the fear of the unknown. And that's one of the things that will keep you from accepting the truth, is like, hey, you don't know how it's all going to work out. You have to step out in faith.
People won't do that in business. They're like, oh, well, gosh, I mean, if I failed, I would die.
Yeah.
Which is not true.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
but in video games, a guy be like, well, I'm not leveled up enough for the boss. Let's just go see what happens.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. But I mean, you said something a few weeks, you said actually on somebody else's podcast that you were a guest on, you said you can bankrupt your business, start a new one the next day. And you followed on with it. If you bankrupt your family, they'll wear the scars for life.
Yeah. And bankrupt your business and go on and start a new one. And there's certainly going to be scars from that, but you can heal those scars.
Yeah.
And going bankrupt means that you're insolvent. You had people you couldn't pay back, and you go through a penalty period, and you're, relieved of those penalties. I say that to say, it's not like you didn't still hurt those people. Ideally, you'd go bankrupt and then make lots of money after the fact when you've figured out what you did wrong and how to be more responsible and how to be a better business owner. And you could go back, even though you're not legally required to, and make those people solvent and pay back the people that you couldn't pay back in the beginning. I say that to say, right, like even though there's scars that would come from bankruptcy, you could rebuild business and you could lose $1 million. You can go bankrupt over $1 million and then make $20 million in the next couple of years.
Yeah.
Right. But your family doesn't work the same way.
Yeah. And that was just a bonus point. But going back to the fear of the unknown, and it's also fear of pain. I mean, one place where we see this, and we gave the big example of the doctor, this happens all the time. Men, if you're out there, and I know you are, and your wife says, hey, do I look fat in these jeans? How do you answer? Like, I think about your story with Lindsay whenever she called you crying about the tire on the side of the road. You said no amount of tears is going to change a tire. That's a dose of truth.
You know, I heard so many people in my life, I heard people talk about it. I mean, the majority of men are under this thought process like, well, there's things you probably shouldn't say to your wife, or, just tell her what she wants to hear in that moment. And I never experienced any truth in life that confirmed that for me. And so, you can call me a jerk, and my wife and I have this joke. She says, you win the rude award every year.
Yeah.
Right? Because sometimes I am a little rude, but my wife also really appreciates that I never lie to her.
Yeah.
That whatever I say to her, sometimes, she'll ask me things and I won't say very much, and that she's catching the hint that maybe you won't like the answer to that question. And she'll press me for it if she wants it or she won't.
Yeah.
But what I'm not going to do is lie to make anybody feel better.
Right. And the great thing about that is that when you do say things, it carries a lot more weight. But you need to be able to have difficult conversations with yourself, with those close to you, whether it's your wife or your kids. Like, if you're not sitting there and you don't have people in your life that can come to you and say, hey, like, I'm just use the proverbial look in the mirror. Like, you need to look at your mirror and realize that something.
If you have that relationship that your wife has to ask you a question that she knows the answer is false, and have an expectation that you would lie in return, and you're having this illusion. What's the purpose of this illusion? The illusion is your wife's love language is words of affirmation.
Very good.
Right?
Yeah.
And if you would just solve that problem, your wife wouldn't have to ask you to lie to her.
Right. Because if she knew that you loved her and you were affirming her all the time, you could say the difficult things because now she knows that your intention is to help her get better.
Exactly.
And that's honestly been something that's really been a great growth for me and Rian, is that she knows, look, I love you. I think you're attractive. I'm madly in love with you. That doesn't mean that we don't want to grow and get better. Not because I'm only going to love you if you do that, but rather because we have a vision and an intention for our life that we have to get better.
Well, so when Josh and I were kids, we used to always argue about cheat codes.
Yeah.
And Josh would use cheat codes, and I'm like, dude, why? Like, you ruined the game. And he his answer was always like, they're not cheat codes, it's advanced game playing.
Right.
That's what he would say. And there's nothing wrong with, it's like infinite ammo cheat in Grand Theft Auto is like the best cheat code, right? It just makes the game more fun. In life, there's certain cheat code, like there's different types of cheating, and you don't want to, I would say, like having to tell your wife that she's fat or say that she's not fat, even if she is. It's the wrong type of cheating.
Right.
You've got to have this belief that I can live by the truth, and it's a better way of living.
Yeah.
Right. And so most men would say like, well, if I say that, it's going to hurt her feelings.
Right.
That's true.
Yeah.
Right. So you don't have to say it necessarily that way, but also understand how would I have to live that I could tell my wife the truth? I think a lot of people live by lies and delusion because they think it's the only way, which in itself is an illusion. You have to break free from all of that and say, I'm going to live by the truth no matter what. And then step 2 is I'm going to figure out how to do it well. Right? Sometimes when you start living by the truth, you're going to suffer at it.
Yeah.
But then you can grow and get good at it.
That's leveling up in the video game.
Exactly.
That's so good, G. All right, now number 3. So remember, we've had personal responsibility, fear. Number 3 is a doozy, G, and it's one that we're always battling. It's pride. Yeah,
pride is so dangerous, and pride really is the source of all sin. To see ourselves as the center, to see ourselves as, it's all about me, it's what I want. And where pride becomes so deceptive is, where Dan Crenshaw said, like, hey, I live by the truth, and that's the Bible, it's not me, and the truth's not going to change. The other side of that thought process is, and there's certainly some, I'm not saying like progressive thought is all evil,
right?
Because there's certainly some progressive thought that's beneficial, and you have to understand that it is a thought process, not necessarily an ideology that you want to live in. If you live in progressivism as an ideology, That's the thought process that is very dangerous, which is because I'm newer and smarter, I'm inherently better.
Right.
And that's a form of pride.
Yeah, big time.
Right. And what pride leads to is thinking like, well, I could be the source of truth.
Mm-hmm.
And I've said it before, and I love the way Charlie Kirk says it. There is a God and it's not you.
Right.
Right. That's the thing that you have to understand. And what I've got to understand is that there is a source of truth, and it's not me.
Mm-hmm.
I can know the truth. I can speak about truth. I can live the truth. But I am not the source of truth. And pride will lead you into this thought process. Well, I feel it and I think it, so it must be so.
Yeah.
And that is a dangerous thought process where you're not looking for the truth. This goes back to what we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
You'll know the truth if what you deeply want in your heart. When you seek the Lord with all your heart, you'll find him. When you seek truth with all your heart and you're willing to give up anything else to know the truth, you'll find it. But pride is to center everything around you. And so if you look at the world to confirm your reality, to confirm your truth, you'll be able to do it, and it'll be a dark deception.
And honestly, I think that is the biggest shortcoming for why people don't see the truth, is because, like you said, they're looking to confirm their own way, because really, if they're looking at who's God of their life, it's themselves. That at a very base level, it's if you don't have a submission to God, all this goes out the window. Because if you're the authority in your life.
One of the, I would say it's one of my favorite arguments because it's a horrible argument.
I didn't expect that.
One of the people who are very atheist and anti-God will say, well, you only need to believe in God. The only reason you do anything good, the only reason that you act right, the only reason that you're not immoral is because you believe in some God who's going to punish you if you don't do it.
Yeah.
I'm inherently good. I'll do it just because I'm a good person. So I don't need God watching me, looking over my shoulder to make sure I do the right thing.
Right.
And that argument to me it's deceitful.
Yeah, 100%.
And it's extremely prideful, because every time I've seen an atheist make that argument, they're throwing it back at the Christian presenter saying, well, I'm better than you.
Right. Well, and it's that thought process. Well, I'm different. I'm built different. I'm this. And it's like, yeah, you are to a certain extent, but there's a limit to that. God's put a unique 1% of his glory in every person. So you're right. You are different, but how far you take that can be very deceptive. So next one.
People want to take partial good as I'm wholly good.
Yeah.
But they'll take partial responsibility as no responsibility.
Yeah, exactly. You can't have it both ways. So coupled with pride, and we kind of touched on it, but it's selfishness is another reason that will keep you from the truth, right? Is like you're more interested in, think about if somebody tells you, I mean, we talked about tithing. Hey, you're gonna give 10% of your income back to God to show honor. Man, you know what I could do with that? Like,
you can build, because you can build a partial scientific model where the universe revolves around the earth.
Right.
We entertained it for hundreds of years.
Yeah.
You can entertain a lot through a selfish thought process. But if you get big enough and you expand far enough, you'll realize that it's broken.
Yeah.
And you can't fix the world. You can't help the world if everything is about you. The universe becomes a very special place when you realize it's not about you, and I get to play a part here, and I can make it better. I can contribute to it, but it's not about me.
And you know what's going to happen when you have that realization? It's going to violate your thought process of fair. I was thinking about this the other day. John the Baptist was called by Jesus the greatest amongst men. That's what he said. He said he's the Elijah that's come. He's the greatest amongst men. He's the greatest of all the prophets. How did his life end? He got beheaded because of a king that made a foolish promise. Like, how meaningless of a finish does that sound for the guy that Jesus is called the greatest? And you could sit there and go like, man, that's not fair. Well, if it's about John the Baptist and if it's only about this life, then you're right.
Well, you want to know how selfish you are? How often do you feel personally attacked?
Yeah.
Because the frequency by which you feel personally attacked is the frequency by which you are selfish. Because when you're selfish, everything's about you, and things happen to you, and they're like, man, they did that just at me.
Yeah.
Right? Like, those people don't like me. Those people.
Yeah. Very good.
Things are very often not about you.
Right.
And when you realize that, right, when you're an unselfish person, like, bad things happen to you and you're like, man, that's just like, it's unfortunate that those people think that way. It's unfortunate that these circumstances have happened. Good thing I'm here to help make it better.
Yeah. And you'll see this when people are like, oh, I can't believe that person didn't invite me to the party. And you start playing all these things out in your head. What if there's just a really good reason? What if someone's sick? I mean, like, it's so defeating to think about like how everything relates back to you. It's an awful way to live. Now, I would say if you have a friend that constantly just pulls out your shortcomings to make jokes about you in public whenever you're just minding your own business, maybe in that case you're not being selfish, and I'm just using that hypothetical situation.
Nick said he's going to start sabotaging himself to prove me wrong because his life keeps getting better.
It's because we'll be in positions where it makes no sense for you to bring me in to make jokes, such as your father's 60th birthday party, where Garrett has the mic.
I thought there was you appreciate humor. Everyone was laughing, so.
But what I'm actually not happy about is that you are not a guy who goes to humor, but you've found a well that it seems to be infinite in the sense that you can make fun of me and everybody else thinks it's funny. And like I said, he was at his father's 60th birthday party and used that opportunity.
I think you just don't like it that I got more laughs than you.
I wasn't trying to get laughs. I was trying to show honor. But I did both. Yeah, well, you did. But I still think your speech could have been better. Anyways, everyone that's listening to this, bar a few people weren't there. But I was just like, where is this coming from? But people were cracking up. So anyways, and G enjoyed it. And because I love G, I like watching him enjoy it. Even my wife was like, did you see how happy he was when he was? I was like, yes, but they were at my expense. Who cares about his happiness? All right. And the very last thing. So we've got what's keeping you from the truth is your personal responsibility, fear, pride, selfishness. And the last one, this is so simple, G. You just don't like it. Like what we just said about the selfish thing was, it's going to violate your sense of fair. I don't like that.
This is you can't handle the truth.
Oof. I like how you brought that full circle. Yeah.
Right. You've got to be, again, to find the truth, you've got to have in your heart, I'm willing to give up anything to know what the truth really is.
Yeah.
And when you have that heart, that's when you'll be able to receive it.
Yeah. And it's so good. One of the things, like, if you're listening to this, I would say the appropriate response to this about what you would do, first and foremost, if you really believe that God is put reality in place.
If you already know what the true source of truth is, why aren't you spending more time with it? Why aren't you reading the Bible more often?
Big time. And why aren't you like getting into groups of other people that are seeking after God, committing and planting yourself in a church? Like if you're a person that watches at home and you never go, I'm telling you, you're missing it. You're wrong. Flat out, you're wrong. Because like we talked about, the worst thing you could have is that your truth is just an illusion. And guess what? If you're only ever taking in the world around you through your own lens, you are not seeing it all. Guaranteed. It doesn't matter how great of a person you are not seeing it all. And if you want the truth and you really want to know it, you need to be plugged in so that people can reveal your blind spots. They can speak into your life. You will be forced to develop in ways when you're committed to other people and you're planted in a church that you would not be if you are transient and really and thinking you could leave at any time.
And for those of you who don't know that the Bible is the source of truth and you're looking, I would tell you will find the truth when you'll be truly open and say, God, I'm willing to, and maybe it's not even saying that to God. Maybe it's you just saying to yourself and coming to this place of surrender and saying, whatever it takes to know the truth, I'm willing to give up anything. And if you'll come to that place, I promise you'll find it.